material, I'm material, I'm material girl.
Hello everybody, my name is Alex and welcome back to my channel. So the day that I'm uploading this is Oscar Sunday, February 9th, 2020. As you might know, I am an aspiring costume designer for the film industry. My dream is to go to these types of events and be nominated and all that stuff. I thought it would be really fun if I could go through films that are being nominated for the Costume Design Award and the designers and kind of discuss the methodology behind their costumes. So as far as the Oscars go, I couldn't really find insight on how they actually decide the winner. I know how they're picked, how they apply to even be nominated in the first place, but I couldn't find information on exactly how they judge them, which kind of sucks for the purpose of this video, but nonetheless we'll discuss them anyways and I'll kind of share my thoughts. So just based on previous winners, I feel like they might judge the winner based on historical accuracy, if it's a period piece, the complexity of the costumes, the construction itself, the story progression in relation to the costume, and also how the story is moved by the costume and how, again, it helps progress the story. So for this video, I did research a lot about the costume designers and their methodologies behind their work. So I watched some interviews, I looked up articles, and I kind of compiled the information about what went on behind the scenes when they created the costumes for this film and symbolism, methodologies, all of that stuff. And I will link those articles down below. So the 5 films that are nominated for the Best Costume Design Award are Joker, Little Women, Jojo Rabbit, The Irishman, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Okay, so the first nominee that we're going to discuss is Mies Rubio from the film Jojo Rabbit. This designer has worked on World War Z, Avatar, Thor films, so a lot of fantasy-based work from this designer. So Jojo Rabbit is set during World War II in Nazi Germany. So for this film, Rubio wanted the costumes to look like wartime from a child's perspective, which is kind of the entire film. She said the movie should be World War II in the summertime with the brightness through Jojo, the main character's eyes. They didn't want it to be like a black and white documentary, like a typical World War II movie where it's kind of gloomy and dark. They wanted quite the opposite feel with this film. So for Jojo, the main character, they wanted to give him a more unorthodox and heroic departure from the uniforms because he does wear a lot of the military style costumes throughout the film. He wanted to be essentially like a little policeman of his household. So as you can see, a lot of his costumes were kind of that military look, but they also had a little bit of a fun, playful aspect to it. As far as Scarlett Johansson's character, who is Jojo's mom, Rubio really wanted to create a lot of those chic looks that many women in Germany had during that time. Researching the looks of the era, Rubio really wanted to create mood boards, like a smart, architectural, geometric based patterns for this character. A lot of the hats and the tweed and plaid and zigzag Missoni style patterns. A lot of high-waisted baggy pants, which a lot of the characters did wear. In this, particularly Adolf Hitler, who was kind of a more playful character, again with that sort of theme. They definitely really honed in on that chic look for her. That was really nice. I thought the costumes were really done well for this film. Next, moving on to Joker, which Mark Bridges is nominated for the Academy Award. So this designer worked on 50 Shades of Grey, Captain Phillips, Silver Linings Playbook, so kind of a wide variety of work done by him. So I found an interview that focused on the production designer and Mark Bridges, who's a costume designer, and kind of how they merged to create these costumes. The production designer is the one that kind of decides the artistic elements of it, kind of the set designing, a lot of aesthetics to films, which I found really interesting because of how they collaborated for these costumes, which were very notable and very iconic. So both of them were really inspired by an old car book from like the 70s. But in this particular film, it's Bridges' costumes that change to reflect Arthur, the main character's journey. Through the film, his costumes evolve as his mind evolves as well. So every piece of the clothing that they did for Arthur was aged and distressed and over dyed. It kind of looked gloomy, dark. They wanted his clothing to feel like his apartment, which was off colors that are clashing, and odd color combinations. As you know by his iconic suit that he was wearing, those colors kind of don't really match. They're a little bit clashing, a little all over the place, which was their intention. So the production designer and Bridges really collaborated to make this whole picture have a real full aesthetic to it, because that was kind of the point. They wanted it to really be pronounced and defined, so they both really collaborated. So again, Bridges wanted his costumes to get darker as the main character Arthur's mind got darker. So some pieces that really enhance this effect that they wanted are his charcoal gray sweater that he wears for the second meeting with the social worker, and then his scab color knit sweater that he wears. So as I said, the story is progressing with his costumes, which is filmed it very, very well. So next we have Jacqueline Duran, who is being nominated for Little Women. Her previous work includes Pride and Prejudice, Anna Karenina, Macbeth, 1917, which is also up for some Academy Awards this year. Little Women is very much a period piece, as you can tell. This is particularly challenging to convey something that's unique and different from a lot of the Victorian era films that are out there, because everything is so conventional with Victorian period costumes and wear and fashion of that time. A lot of her work is rooted in the individuality of each character and not so much the picture as a whole. It's just each character specifically and how she constructed their own looks and the symbolism within that. So particularly with each character, she says, even as a child, Amy is the most decorated. She loves fancy clothes, a trait that carries on into adulthood. Meanwhile, Beth doesn't dress for occasion. She stays at home, acting as the glue for the family, so she's not really pronounced in the clothing that she wears. I also really like that Duran played with the color schemes and palettes for each character. Color is a really symbolic thing within costume designing. It really conveys tone, mood, character traits, and even foreshadows events sometimes. Side note, I know with my film I did work with color palettes a lot for each character. I gave a couple different characters their own palettes that we really honed in on, that really kind of progressed the story, I felt like. So Duran did that a lot with this film. So for these characters, Joe's was a red palette, Meg's was green, Beth's color was pink or brown, and Amy's was light blue. So I really like that because, again, it's so hard to be original with period pieces. It's really, really hard to kind of come up with a new way of doing it or to distinguish your film's costumes from other period pieces. She's obviously very good at this. She won for Anna Karenina a couple years ago at the Oscars. So she's clearly very well versed at this era and this period. And third, we have Ariane Phillips, who did Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Her previous work includes 3:10 to Yuma, Girl Interrupted, and the Kingsman movies, which are my personal favorites. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Ariane at Quentin's Theater in Hollywood, actually. I was able to hear her speak about. I was so fascinated by everything that she had to say that night. It was incredible. So with Ariane, it is a lot of detail-based work. So she really loves to integrate a lot of small details here and there that make such a complex and rich story through the costumes. You can literally pick through every frame of like details. This movie in particular was really rich, especially being during the late 60s, early 70s. You can really see a lot of those little details and things that really symbolize that period during this film. Some little details include Rick's medallion necklace, which was modeled after kind of the bad boys of the era, which is like Steve McQueen. It's a super bravado essence to a lot of Rick's costumes and what she put in those. For Cliff, it was definitely his Hawaiian shirt and the laid back denim, the moccasins and little aviators that he wears. She says that Hawaiian shirts are part of the Quentin Tarantino vernacular. We've seen them before in his films, and so I knew that this needed to be unique to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And it definitely was. She chose a vintage fabric for his Hawaiian shirt, and it was very distinguished from the other ones in his films. And then another little detail was the juxtaposition of shoes between Rick and Cliff. As you might know, Rick wears those cowboy boots and then Cliff wore the moccasins. One of the opening shots was actually of Rick's cowboy boots next to Cliff's moccasins. You can kind of see the immediate difference in their character from the get-go. Then finally, Margot Robbie's Sharon Tate. So she was actually fortunate enough to wear pieces and items from Sharon's personal closet given to them by Sharon's sister. Marianne really talks about how little items can really help the actors get into character and help them embody who they're playing. Again, with Rick's boots, those boots really help man feel tough. So for Margot Robbie, she wore pieces that Sharon actually wore. And I just think the entire ensemble had such individuality and again, those small details that really portrayed the story very well. And I really loved the costumes for this film. Finally, we have Sandy Powell and Christopher Peterson for The Irishman. So her work includes The Favorite, Shutter Island, The Aviator, Shakespeare in Love, Wolf of Wall Street. But The Irishman was a lot less flamboyant than the other nominees for this particular award season. Their task was really rooted in the complexity of telling this 50+ year storyline. So that meant encompassing all of the trends within the 5 decades, which include silhouettes of each decade because they're very, very different. Fabric textures, the color schemes, all of that has to be conveyed and done well. So the lapels, which are like the fabric parts of like a dress coat for men, were wide in the middle 50s and then they got narrower in the 60s and then wider again in the 70s. Similarly with ties, they were skinny in the 60s and then wide in the 70s. Even the belts, you know, vary within these decades. That was a challenge for them and I feel like they did that very well. Not only did they have to dress the main characters, which were over 200 main characters, they also had to dress 6,500 extras during this 3.5-hour movie. So I mean, complete hats off to that. That is insane to me. But again, this film is a lot less flamboyant. It's a lot more humble and rooted. And it definitely contrasts Martin Scorsese's Casino and Goodfellas, which are, again, mob movies. But this one was a little bit different. It was a lot more simple. It wasn't as flashy. Characters weren't as lavish, I would say, with their dress. Finally, a detail that I really admire about the work that they did was work with the actors with their silhouettes. The actors being in their 70s and then having to look much younger in some scenes with the age progression of the story. I could definitely tell watching the film that they had to play around with the silhouettes and the fits of each item on the actor, depending on whether the suit was more fitted or more baggy, even indicating age with them. A trick that they did to make Robert De Niro look much older is when he's sitting in that home. They put him in high-waisted sweatpants in a wheelchair. The fit was a lot oversized on him, and so it makes him look small and frail and weak, you know, to kind of indicate age. It was a combination of working with each decade and their particular details that they had to convey with that particular time and the trends, but also their age and kind of playing with how things appear on camera and how they can kind of manipulate the actor's appearance in the costumes. So that is it for the nominees. My personal prediction, I feel like it's gonna go to a period piece film. So definitely Jojo Rabbit and Little Women really fall into that category. Doing research for this video and kind of just my knowledge in general, the Oscars and the Academy definitely favor films that are set in a distant time, you know, so period films or fantasy. I really do feel like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood had a lot of symbolism, as well as Joker. Those films really encompassed the poetic nature of costume designing, but I feel like as far as the Academy goes, I feel like Little Women is gonna take this one just because they love the period films and the classic styles of those eras. But I don't know, it's honestly very difficult to say this here. I definitely think it's gonna be a period film. So yeah, that is kind of it for this video. I hope you enjoyed my commentary. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Yeah, so I will see you in the next video.